In a franchise with 11 mainline entries, countless spin-offs and sequels across multiple different genres spanning over 35 years, it's understandable that new fans might not know exactly where to begin. Well, today I'm going to use my experience as a lifelong Dragon Quest fan to help you find not only which would be the best Dragon Quest game to start with, but which would be the best Dragon Quest game for you in particular. I've played through every game in the main series multiple times, yes, even Dragon Quest II, and the vast majority of spin-offs, even some that weren't released outside of Japan. If you appreciate videos like this, please be sure to help out the channel by hitting that like button as well as subscribing and turning notifications to all so you won't miss out on any upcoming videos. Now let's begin. The original Dragon Quest came out in Japan for the Famicom on May 27, 1986. The game is known as the grandfather of the JRPG genre we all know and love today. Taking inspiration from Western RPGs at the time and adding a command menu and other changes to simplify the gameplay, it became fairly popular in Japan and was a part of a number of us here in North America's childhood as Dragon Warrior on the original NES. This was where it all started, and after 4 entries on the NES and Famicom, 2 entries on the Super Famicom, along with fantastic remakes of Dragon Quests 1 through 3, the franchise was off to a strong start. It wasn't nearly as successful here in the West unfortunately, but those of us who had managed to get our hands on some of the games became obsessed. Other than Dragon Warrior 1 to 4 on the NES, we didn't get another mainline Dragon Quest game here in North America until Dragon Warrior 7 on the PlayStation. Other than the Dragon Warrior 1 through 3 remakes on the Game Boy Color. After that was Dragon Quest VIII on the PS2, which was finally titled Dragon Quest instead of Dragon Warrior, which in a way was awesome because now we would get the games as they were always named in Japan, but also confusing. You see, growing up, I had played Dragon Warrior 1 and 4, and it wasn't until Dragon Quest VIII came out that I had gotten unknowingly back into the series. I had a bizarre sense of nostalgia when it came to the monsters and sound effects, but didn't really understand why until I did a bit of research online to discover that this was in fact a continuation of the series I had once loved as a kid on the NES. After playing through Dragon Quest VIII, I immediately went back and replayed 1, then played through Dragon Quests 2 and 3 for the first time ever, replayed 4, and it was around this time that we started getting the DS remakes of Dragon Quests 4, 5, and 6, which was the first time 5 and 6 were available to us in the West. I bought 7 on PS1 and 9 on the DS, then we were unfortunately shut off from playing the fantastic MMO Dragon Quest X until years later when people, including myself, started to figure out how to register an account for the game using VPNs. Now, thanks to the Dragon Quest Clarity Project and DragonQuestAbbey.com, anyone can play Dragon Quest X in English with a little bit of setup. After that, of course, came my favorite game of all time, Dragon Quest XI, which excelled at everything I loved about the franchise, whilst having a more modern presentation and keeping great long-standing traditions. So where, you may be asking, should a newcomer or someone interested in getting back into the series start? Well, that honestly depends on each person and their tastes, tolerances, and preferences. Of course, if you're okay with playing NES-era JRPGs and don't find them too cryptic or tedious, I'd say start where it all began in Dragon Quest I. The series does have connections within a lot of the mainline entries, with Dragon Quest II being a sequel of sorts to Dragon Quest I by taking place 100 years after the events of the first game. There's also a lot of spin-offs which end up being prequels or sequels of sorts, like Dragon Quest Monsters starring Terry from Dragon Quest VI, but back when he was a child, Dragon Quest Treasures featuring Eric and his sister from Dragon Quest XI, back when they were kids, as well as Dragon Quest Monsters The Dark Prince starring a younger Sorrow, the main villain from Dragon Quest IV. So ideally you would start from the beginning and work your way through the franchise in order of releases. So if you want to start from the beginning, I would start with the Erdrick trilogy, and as strange as that sounds, I recommend starting with Dragon Quest III. The third entry in the series was a big step up in terms of quality and gameplay. Creating the now iconic class or vocation system, Dragon Quest III lets you create your own party and choose between a number of different jobs like martial artist, cleric, mage, goof-off, and so on. Not only were you able to create characters and choose their vocations, you could also change vocations once you got to a certain point in the game, allowing you to keep all the abilities and stat increase percentages that you gained from your first job class and carry it into your next while restarting that class at level 1. This added a ton of customization, allowing players to try out new combinations and most importantly cater their party to each individual player's playstyle. The story was also a step up with a massive twist happening late game and each town having their own personalities and quests. Dragon Quest III kinda laid the foundation once again for all the games to come, which is why if you're okay with it, I recommend playing Dragon Quest III, then Dragon Quest I, then II, to get the original Erdrick trilogy. Dragon Quest IV kicks off a new trilogy in the franchise known as the Zenithian trilogy. This is where the connections between games start to become a lot more loose than they were in Dragon Quest I through III, which is known as the Erdrick trilogy. Dragon Quest IV is to this day my second favorite game of all time, and even the NES version has aged really well. For most newcomers, however, I would probably recommend they play the DS/mobile version, as it's just a lot more streamlined and graphically pleasing. Plus it has a great post-game that adds a lot to the story and gives you full control of your party members in the final chapter, whereas in the NES version they all had their own built-in AI. Which could get pretty frustrating yet hilarious, let me tell ya. Dragon Quest IV is broken down into 5 different chapters, with each of the first 4 focusing on a new character or group of characters. Then in chapter 5, they all come together in their attempt to save the land. This game honestly has some of the best characters ever made, and as much as some people hate the AI in the final chapter, and the fact that you jump to new characters every chapter, I personally love it. Having each chapter broken down to a new party gives you a chance to really focus on individual characters and their stories, making them able to be much more fleshed out, and allowing you to have much more of an attachment to them all once they come together in the end. The AI is also something that to me adds a ton of charm to the game. In Dragon Quest, you are always the main character or hero, so to me it makes sense that you control the hero and the others take recommendations on what their strategies should be in battle, but in the end are their own people. Elena will always do her best to go for all-out critical attacks, Kyril will always do his best to support the party whilst hilariously trying to cast one-hit kill spells which almost never work, and Tornikel will always do whatever the heck he feels like at any given moment. Like I said, to me, this just adds to the characters and their charm, especially in the NES era where it wasn't very easy to get across the characters' preferences and personalities. Like I said, to me, this just adds to the characters and their charm. If all this sounds good to you, I would highly recommend starting with Dragon Quest IV. The next recommendation is one that's recommended a lot and is loved by pretty much everyone who's played it. That would of course be Yuji Horii, the creator of the franchise's favorite entry in the series, Dragon Quest V. Dragon Quest V is a story of family and fatherhood. You start off journeying the world with your dad, and by the end of the game you'll be putting a stop to the villains alongside your children and wife. This is also known as easily the darkest story in the series for reasons I can't get into without dropping some serious spoilers. Dragon Quest V was also the game that introduced recruiting monsters to your party, allowing you to tame and use a bunch of different classic and new Dragon Quest monsters in battle. This was actually the game that inspired Game Freak to make the Pokemon series, so if you love monster taming, great dark storytelling, revenge plots, and comeback stories, Dragon Quest V is definitely the game for you. Next, I'm going to jump a few entries and get to another game that a ton of people recommend starting with, and is also the game a lot of lifelong Dragon Quest fans started with themselves. I'm of course talking about Dragon Quest VIII on the PS2 and 3DS. Dragon Quest VIII is an incredible standalone journey with excellent characters, a new skill tree style level up system, and a vast, beautiful world and story to explore. This was also the first Dragon Quest game to really go 3D, as before the merger with Squaresoft, the series still had that 2D sprite-based look. Now, with better technology at their disposal, they were able to not only tell, but show the vast world and stories that we love about the franchise, but with a much more modern look. Dragon Quest VIII is kind of the pinnacle of PS2 era JRPGs to me and many fans of the genre, so if you loved other PS2 or even PS1 JRPGs, this might be the best place for you to jump into the series. My last recommendation for a starting point would have to of course be the latest and in my opinion best entry in the series, Dragon Quest XI. Dragon Quest XI does what Dragon Quest VIII did on the PS2, but on the PS4, Switch, and other modern platforms. It took what we love so much about classic Super NES and PS1 era JRPGs and made them play, look, and feel like they belong in the modern age. With some of, if not the best characters of all time, Dragon Quest XI carries forward the best of what we got in previous entries like Dragon Quest III, IV, and VIII. The story and world are absolutely incredible, and the characters, even the ones outside of your party, are all just so well done. I love pretty much everything about this game, and despite it having connections to a bunch of the previous games in the series because of it essentially being a love letter to the entire franchise, it's still a great standalone story and experience that does a fantastic job of making you want to go back and experience some of the early entries after playing it. The Definitive Edition even has the Tickington side story, which allows you to go back into previous Dragon Quest games and fix the problems caused by the powerful Time Worm. So where do you think you should start in this incredible franchise? If you're already a fan, where did you start? Tell me in the comments below, and make sure to like, subscribe, and turn notifications to all. If you enjoyed this video and know someone who's interested in getting into the series but isn't sure where to start, maybe send this video their way to help them decide for themselves. Thank you so much for all your support over the years. If you want to help out myself and this video a ton, please hype the video on mobile. You can also join the channel and become a Dragon Warrior yourself today. Thanks again so much for watching, you guys. I will see you in the next one.